my organisation, Grassroots to Global, has been working with people's assemblies in communities in Scotland and East Africa. These are co-organised and led together with the communities themselves, and we're learning more and more about how to create an atmosphere that supports people to listen deeply to each other, to be self-reflexive, and so listening to themselves as well, and think creatively together. And I guess I want to talk about the how of assemblies, because I think that kind of fine-grained how we do it is a really, really crucial point that I've not seen spoken about so often, in the terms I'm talking about it, as well as the kind of much larger grained how do we come together and move towards shifting power on the kind of macro. So experience has shown us that run by governments or even used to advise governments, assemblies are just as easy to co-opt as other democratic processes. So just in themselves, they can easily become rubber stamp exercises, as other people have kind of hinted at. And they're not necessarily a huge improvement on what we already have. The fundamental problem that we're facing is much deeper than just the format or the number of people who are involved in our decision-making. And this is because we're deeply embedded in a system which is based on a power dynamic where a few people have a lot more power and most people have much less. And at first glance, this seems blindingly obvious, but it has far-reaching implications for every part of our lives that can be hard to spot. This power dynamic requires those of us with much less power to accept and play their part. Domination can't work when people won't let themselves be dominated. But we've been effectively educated and socialized to accept and even feel safe when someone else is in charge. Even when we aren't, most of us have been convinced that we live in a world where, with lots of competing interests, rather than seeing that we all have at least one big thing in common, we have almost no say in the big decisions that affect our lives. So we usually find it hard to come together to make change. We've absorbed this power dynamic since we were very young. Some are in charge, others need to do what they're told. It happens in the way that we parent, in our schooling, in our workplaces, and most of our institutions, not just the political ones. So it's like the sea that we're swimming in. For the most part, we don't even notice it. The big issue that has stymied our attempts to radically change our system for decades, if not centuries, is that we haven't until recently been aware of how deep the impacts of growing up in this kind of colonial domination culture have on us. Whether we're in a power over or a power under role, the impacts of this system live in our nervous systems, making us reactive, frightened, or aggressive when we don't need to be. And because the workings of our nervous systems are largely unconscious, we're very often not even aware that this is going on. And in fact, even talking publicly about what we're feeling, about what's going on in our nervous systems, has until very recently been taboo, and even now can take a lot of courage. But if we don't tackle this issue of power, this kind of depth, if we don't talk about it and find ways to start to build another kind of culture together, then through no intention of the organizers, assemblies can end up simply reinforcing the status quo. If we do start talking about it and working with this power dynamic, not just as a social wrong, but as something that reaches into and damages almost all aspects of our personal as well as our working lives, but that also has a huge capacity to heal, we have an unprecedented opportunity for change. Much of the work we've been doing is about creating structures and processes that try to imagine and model what a power with democracy could look like, and so help bring it into being. Although we don't always mention it directly, we're trying to create processes that are less likely to trigger people's nervous systems. Facilitators can play a crucial role in this. Having a leader embodying a culture of power with can be way more impactful than just talking about it. And they can help frame the deliberation as involving not just our heads, but our emotions and our bodies. A facilitator who's worked on these issues in themselves can really support groups to start to expand their idea of what's allowed in our democratic spaces. So, for instance, when we're dealing with a hot topic, it can be easy for the pace of the conversation to speed up, which makes it easy to slip into reactivity. Offering moments of quiet, possibly with a bit of support for mindfulness on offer, can be very helpful as long as people can opt out if they want. But however you do them, these quiet spaces for self-reflection are crucial for noticing and soothing triggered states as well as processing everything that's been spoken about. One format that we've found that can really help with this, and which encourages curiosity and deep listening, especially when people disagree, is using council circles, where people go around in a circle taking turns to speak spontaneously and to listen deeply to the other people for the rest of the time. Although it can feel a bit unfamiliar speaking in such a structured way, it can make space for people who usually don't speak up, and help those who tend to talk a lot focus on listening and getting curious about what's actually going on for other people. Circles like this often open up the conversation into unexpected directions and enable levels of openness and compassion that can be hard to reach with other processes. So as you can hear, democratic processes that are trying to embody a culture of power with can look and feel very different to mainstream democratic spaces where people are mostly just trying to win arguments, and even to new democratic spaces that focus mostly on rational or intellectual techniques. Such seemingly soft assembly processes deeply challenge the habitual ways we reproduce the dominant system. And they can support people to hear, share, and process hard information on the level of the existential crisis we're in and the level of change we need, as well as opening up new avenues of connection, courage, and inspiration. Making this level of change is not easy, but given the forces we're up against, we believe it's essential to grab the opportunity to explore these paradigm-changing insights while we still have the time. There's still lots of work to do to develop this way of working and make it more accessible. But the shocks to the system of our current moment of existential threat are also opening up possibilities for genuinely fundamental change. So we're still hopeful.